Well, again, everybody, and welcome back to your daily edition of the Trig Podcast of Joy and Goso TV, here with my Goso Bell. Let me actually get it here close to me. There you are, Goso Bell. On this awesome Wednesday, November 28th, 2018. This is that season between Thanksgiving and the beginning of Christmas season. So it's kind of that week where we're just waiting for the next beautiful big thing. Christmas is almost here. Advent is here. I love this time of the year. Everything about it I love. You know, ironically, I didn't used to love Christmas. I used to hate Christmas carols. I think it came from all of my church background in music, where I had to do Christmas carols, and I'm just a rebel. I want to talk to you today about how to see the future. How to see the future, and then if you're someone like me who sees the future, or who sees connections regarding the future, how do you then communicate the future to especially those who don't see the future? Now, before you think that I have a crystal ball, which of course I do not, let me explain to you what I mean. By the way, I'm working on a couple of things in my communication, just so you know. I'm working on pausing. There it is. I'm also working on finishing my sentences. I think that because of my Spanish upbringing, where things are quote backwards, I often don't finish my sentences. And so it's hard to explain, but I think you may know what I'm talking about. And I know I definitely can tell when I listen back at my podcasts when I don't finish my sentences. There was an example. I had to finish that instead of just leaving you hanging. So I've been always been accused, to put it this way, of being ahead of the curve. I think this is something that a lot of us deal with. You probably know what I'm talking about. If you are an empath, if you are an intuitive, an NI, an NF, INFJ, ENFJ, any of those NF in the middle. So if you are more of a sensing type, meaning a practical person, you may not experience this as much, but if you are an NF type, then you know what I'm talking about. It's not having any sense of, fortune telling, or, it's really all about connections. And if you are familiar with the Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram or any of these different personality tests, then this will make a lot of sense to you. If not, you can just go to, Google and just type in personality types. Maybe take a test and see, especially if you are an S or an N. S for sensing and for intuitive. And I think that at least will get you started. Now, when you are an NF, like I am, I'm an INFJ, I think. Maybe INFP, maybe ENFJ, one of those. But I'm definitely in the NF quadrant. When you're one of those types, you live in your thoughts. And so I'm constantly looking up. I was telling Rochelle, my wife, Rochelle, the other night, what this feels like. You're constantly laying on, let's say, the beach, or you could be just in your backyard and it's late at night. You could be on top of your car. And you could be at Joshua Tree, if you know what that is. This is the desert here in the California area. Beautiful space. Everybody knows Joshua Tree. Come on, Trig. And imagine you're looking up at the stars. And where everyone would see just the beauty, of course, of the stars and the awe and the expansion of the universe and the vastness and the infinity of the universe. Those of us who have this NI-NF thing, we see connections. And I don't literally mean when it comes to the stars. I mean in terms of life. So when I look up at the stars, there's a song that I love, just reminded me. I think it was Switchfoot. When I look at the stars, I feel like myself. And that's exactly what the NF gift or type is like. You look at life, you look at the past, the present, the future, and you make connections. You see things and patterns that others don't see. So back to the whole idea of the stars. Someone along the ways, was it the Egyptians? I don't know. way back at the beginning of time, looked up at the heavens, and where everyone saw just vastness, these individuals saw the Milky Way, or they saw, I don't know if you can see the Milky Way, maybe I'm wrong with that, but they saw the Big Dipper, the Little Dipper, the 7 little cows. I'm not an astronomer, but you know what I mean, right? And then, of course, you get into astrology and all of these things. And I'm not, again, talking about that particularly. I'm just saying this gift that we have, some of us have, many of us have, it's a gift of seeing patterns. Whereas everyone else just sees the majesty of the skies. Or maybe they, back to real life here, maybe they look at the future with fear. And not that I don't have fear of the future. Of course I do. But I would say most of the time, I don't look at the future with fear. I look at it almost as a self-fulfilling prophecy. So let me give you an example. So we have 3 amazing teens, and they're 19, 17, and 15. So looking at their patterns, again, this is not a crystal ball. This is not even prayer or even spiritual for that matter. I think it has shades of that, but it's mostly observation and analysis. It's very logical, very left brain, and yet it's completely mysterious. So looking at our teens, I've obviously known who they are. I see their patterns, their habits. I have millions of pictures of them, not just simply going to school on the first day, but of what that meant and what that was saying to me and to life about them. And so you have these billions and billions of gigabytes of information in my brain. Really, they're in life. It's just that my brain is processing this at 1,000,000 miles an hour at the speed of light, speed of sound, speed of light. And so now, let's say, as I look ahead at them, at their lives, as they go into college and into the rest of their lives and into adulthood, I can, you could call it predict, you could call it observe, you could call it a continuum. I can pretty much know, guess, estimate where their lives are headed based on observation of their last 19, 17, 15 years. Times 1,000,000, because if you think about, let's say, how many thoughts have you had just in these last 2 minutes that you're listening to me? You probably have had thousands of thoughts. Or in a day, how many thousand? Imagine how many thoughts there are in a day for you, or in a week, a year. Millions, right? Billions. So imagine 19 years times billions of thoughts per day. I mean, I don't even know how that, you count a trillion, quadrillions of moments of thoughts. The NF person processes. This seems crazy, right? Like super computers. Like, it's divinity in us. It really is. It's the universe. It's God. It's life. It's protein. It's DNA. It's all of these things, neurons and electrons, all of that processed through my brain. And then from that data, then I can project where this is going. Of course, I make mistakes in terms of, that's not what I expected. I may be just led by my own emotions and not by what I really know. So it doesn't mean that, let's say in my case, that I do what I should do. Meaning let me give you another example. So I have this friend that I met years ago, and from the beginning, I kind of knew that this wasn't going to work out. He wanted to do some projects and I wanted to do some projects, but I just knew in an instant. I thought, nope, this is not going anywhere. But because of a lot of things, bad habits and people pleasing, and sometimes even just a lack of boldness, I would say, I kind of let things go, and then they ended up exactly as I thought they would, poorly. So having these intuitions, these premonitions, these, whatever you want to call them, these connections, doesn't mean that you obey them, that you listen to them. I mean, that's human nature. But they definitely are there. So my pursuit and my hope is that the more that I go through life, the more that I will listen to that still small voice, to those impressions, to those connections. And as I said, I don't think it's necessarily the voice of God. I mean, I do think that it is all God breathed, that all wisdom is from God, from Jesus. I believe that. But I think this is a certain type of personality. Other people, and this is not me, they process life through analytics, through measuring things, through data. Let's say in my church, I mean, there are people in my leadership team that process spirituality through facts and figures. How many people, how much are they giving? Where are we headed? Measuring things. For me, it's intuitive stuff. It's all about the connections that I'm making. And the connections include data, but it doesn't get stuck with data. It's not just feelings, although it includes people's feelings and emotions. And as I said, sometimes I can be wrong because I'm a sinner, and whether you're an intuitive or a sensor type, you're going to just do what you want, regardless of the data, regardless of what you hear. Now, from as early as I can remember, I've had these impressions. Or this gift, let's call it. It's manifested itself through a few things, or a few ways. First, through music. When I play music, I am literally transported. And once again, this is just being an artist. I am on the Enneagram, I think I'm a 3, I think I'm a 4, I think I'm all 9 types. Well, no, I'm not all 9, but I'm an artist. I'm also an achiever. I'm also a people pleaser, peacemaker. So I'm somewhere between 3, 4, and 9, I believe. I don't think I'm a 1, a 2, a 5, 6, 7, or 8. I think I'm either a 9, a 3, or a 4. And maybe there's a connection between those 3. I'm not sure. So if I am a 4, which is the artist, and maybe with a 3 wing, as I call it, meaning that I want to achieve, because I'm really achievement driven. So anyway, what I was saying is that from the beginning of time, I've had these impressions. Probably the first time that I recognized it was when a mentor of mine, kind of like in a negative/positive way, called me out on my intuition. I think it was mostly positive. Maybe I just didn't take it the right way. We were at this dinner, and he was kind of going through all the different staff members, maybe saying nice things about us. I think that's what he meant to do. When he got to me, he called me a lightning rod. And that didn't offend me. Actually, I thought, man, finally someone who understands me. What kind of offended me, I guess, was that he said that I was 2 years ahead of the curve. I think I was 10 years ahead. But what offended me was that it almost sounded like he was saying I didn't have my feet on the ground, that I wasn't being a realist, that I wasn't being realistic. And that could be. That may be maybe one of the faults, I guess, if you want to call it that, of my type, of our type, if you relate to what I'm saying. The present doesn't really concern me. It just doesn't. You know how like people say, live in the present, live in the moment. I think the present is boring. Now, the future, or these connections, can cause me a lot of anxiety. And that's why I go to 6. 6 and the Enneagram type is the anxious type. So when I look ahead, and it's not that I'm foreseeing earthquakes. Again, this is not anything along those lines. What I mean is when I look at the future and I know where I'm supposed to be, or where we're supposed to be, or what we're supposed to do. And so whenever people don't understand what I'm trying to say, or maybe I don't explain myself as I wish I would, or whatever, that's when anxiety sets in. Because I think the stats are that 60% of humanity are sensors. My wife is a sensing type. I would say my mom is probably a sensing type. I think our 3 kids are probably all intuitives. I'm not 100% sure. You know, they're still young. But 60% of humanity doesn't care about intuitive stuff. Now, they love the intuitives because we're the artists, we're the visionaries. So if you think about most of our presidents or of your leaders or the people that inspire you on film or authors are mostly intuitives, NFs, feeler types. And if you think of all of your favorite movies, let's say all of the Star Wars, or maybe what else? I'm not a Harry Potter fan, but all the Harry Potter stuff. So NFs inspire us, but there's always this tension between the intuitives and the sensors, unless we learn how to really appreciate each other, which is what my wife and I have done. So in our case, she keeps me grounded, mostly when I get anxious and depressed about the future or about my inability to get to the future or to bring about the future. And then I help her to dream, to think outside of the practical stuff or of the day-to-day. So it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful marriage, certainly for us. Now, so that one day when this mentor said I'm a lightning rod, I love that part. And then the whole thing about 2 years, it offended me, but really, I mean, he was right. And it was interesting that someone else recognized that. I think that was the first time that someone else recognized that in me. And then, of course, since then, many other people have seen the same thing in meetings, staff meetings, and board meetings, and just in general practice. Again, with my wife, I would say Rochelle, is probably my greatest advocate and supporter of my futuristic gifts. When I took the Strengths Finders, I think futurist was the number one strength. All of these things, right? Now, what is the problem with being a futurist? I hope I explained kind of what an NF is all about, a futurist, I guess. Well, anxiety is the biggest problem for us, because trying to move a whole group of people, especially that have power, that are censors, that sign your check, that make decisions, try to move them towards the future, it's like pulling teeth. It's like we're talking in 2 different languages. And so the challenge for the feeler, for the NF, is to try to keep our feet on the ground, mostly through language and through words and through the written form. And so I often have to force myself to write down my thoughts, not for my sake, not for even the listener's sake, but for the sake of those who may not understand my words. Because my words, as a friend usually told me, are just too deep. And that sounds presumptuous. All I mean is that it's different than what the S will listen to. The S might be more looking for data, for practical steps. I mean, as I said, my wife, I'll maybe give her a little bit of an introduction to my sermon, and she'll often say, it sounds great, but what am I going to do with this? And so I always have to, because again, 60% of my audience and the world are censors, I have to constantly frame and as I said, just bring practical application to my teachings, my thoughts, this podcast, etc., which is often boring for me, but it's in me. I think practically, but it's just not my preferred mode of communication. So living in that tension, it can cause anxiety, a ton of anxiety. And so, as you know, I deal with anxiety. I was heading to a meeting the other night, and everything in me was shaking, my legs, my lips, my heart, everything, because I was so anxious, not over, anything except wanting to communicate what I know I had to communicate. And just that anxiety over our people. It's not over people. It's really over just me being true to myself. That's the greatest anxiety that I often feel. Am I going to be true to myself, or am I going to just go home and suck my thumb and be depressed and eat ice cream till 2 a.m., which I often do. And in this case, I was true to myself. And of course, you also have, of course, God. He often just does what he wants to do, regardless of my little brain, which is so limited by this body, emotions, and space and time and language. I mean, we're so limited as humans. We're such limited creatures. We're not infinite. I mean, meaning our minds and our souls, our spirits are, but these bodies, they die, they get old, they get fat, wrinkly, they break, they fall apart. I had a friend who just messed up her back and now she's in bed, you know? I mean, that's how horrible. Our bodies are such beautiful parts of us, but it's really the least effective part of us. I think that makes me what do they call us? I don't know. Anyway, I think those who hate the body. I don't hate the body, but I see its limitations. I love the spirit. I love divinity. I love the universe. I love the spirit of God. And yet, as we know from the incarnation and this beautiful theology of what's the Greek word? I always forget it. It's in Philippians 2. It's not koinonia, but it's another beautiful Greek word. The beauty of Jesus, of God becoming flesh, John 1, of Philippians 2, of 1 John 1. That's the incarnation. That's the power of the gospel, is that God became flesh. And that's why I think it's a dualist, I believe. That's why they can't stand the gospel, because they say, and you know, I can relate to this. They say, how can God become flesh? This is what the Muslims believe, right? How can God, Allah, or the universe, how can he become flesh, much less die on a cross? It makes sense to me, even though that is exactly the beauty of the gospel, that God became flesh. He became a putrid, booger-producing human. And he did that because, guess what? That's who we are. I'm not infinite. I am infinity bound by this frail body. And that's why Paul said, wow, what a mess of a body. Who will deliver me from this basically bag of sin, is what he said in Romans 8. And yet he says, praise be to God, because he delivers me. He delivers our body. And then, again, the gospel being so perfect, when this mortal flesh is done and gone, we will receive a brand new body. Man, how can you not become a Christian? How can you not be a Christian? It's a perfect narrative and the perfect story. But back to infinity. So anxiety is a big problem. I would say the other problem with us futurists is patience. Patience with people that don't see it. Now, the joy of being an intuitive is when you surround yourself with people. I don't know, not surround yourself. There are people who get you. I have a beautiful tribe around me, including sensing types, my wife included, plus many other staff and friends, that they may not get me 100%, but they know I'm right. They trust what I'm saying because first, it's from God. Second, it's the Spirit. Third, they trust me. And then maybe fourth, and more importantly, what they're hearing, they know is true. So for example, the other day I was having a meeting, some of my staff, my team, and they wanted to go right to the details of, okay, how are we going to pay the bills? How are we going to take care of this? And I said, let's take care of that. I actually want you guys to take care of that, which was perfect, right? Because that's what they do. That's how they think. And I said, let me actually take you higher to the 30,000 foot level. And they were just in awe. And they were literally crying because of the truth of what I was saying. It was just beautiful. It was a great combination of the two gifts, where there's trust and love, and trust especially. This can be magical. So, but you have to be patient, and that's something I have struggled with a lot. I've learned. I'm trying to learn to be patient. Also, the Enneagram has help when I have sensing types, and they are 6s or 5s, which are more the analytical types. Kind of the, let's see, it's 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the 5, 6, 7 combo, that triad, are the hardest ones for me to get along with. Ironically, I think my son is a 5, or 5 or 6. And I get along with him great. He's 15. But I think we will see things differently. And as I said, that can be a gift. My wife is a 1, I believe. So I'm learning to get along with the S's and with the other triads in the Enneagram, because that's the gift and the beauty of humanity, is to get along with each other, to understand each other, to, be understood, of course, and know yourself and self-awareness, and to thyself be true, yes. But eventually, if you want to lead and impact other people and change humanity, change the world for Jesus, you have to learn how to work with other people, including when to distance yourself from some people. That's the beauty, I think, of all this. So anxiety, patience, those are the obstacles. How do I overcome them? Well, as I mentioned, being aware, learning from these different tools, how to get along with other people, putting myself in their shoes. But I think the greatest, the biggest, or the most important thing that you can do, that we can do as empaths, is to be ourselves, is to show up in the world as ourselves. Because as many people say, everybody else is already taken. So you might as well be you. Now, the reason why I have always struggled with being me is because first I didn't understand who the heck me is, who I am. You know what I'm talking about? I'll listen to this guy and that person and this author and that podcaster, and I'm like, oh, that's who I am. And I'm always looking for external affirmation. I think that's maybe where I am an INFP. So I think the INFP is a people pleaser, basically, versus just living out of his own truth or her own truth. And even though I know my own truth, I'm always looking for someone else to affirm and to confirm what I feel. It's the worst part of me. I'm trying to get away from that and not look for consensus. And that's where I think I'm a 9. The 9 is always looking for consensus. They think that Bill Clinton and Obama and all the great presidents, Reagan, were all 9s. And that's why they did such amazing things, because they looked for consensus. I think that works, but when you're like we are at a place of crisis, trying to figure out our church and our future, consensus doesn't work. You have to be more of a dictator. I really believe that. And so, and honestly, I am, in my essence, take this the right way, a dictator, meaning I am led by what I believe. Think of Trump. I mean, he's not a 9. He's obviously an 8 or a 3. He doesn't care what you think. He's just going to do whatever he wants at the expense of everyone else. That's an unhealthy 3 or 8. That's not a healthy type of person. But I know that in me is a lot of, I know what I'm doing. Don't tell me what to do, bro. I was talking to a friend the other day, and he and I used to play basketball together when we were both in our 20s. And I have no recollection of this, because when you're an 8 or a 3 or whatever the heck I am, you're just doing your thing. You don't care about anybody else. And apparently we were playing basketball, and I kind of remember, I think we got into a fight, or maybe 2 or 3, over just basketball. Of course, me thinking that I was better than him, and I'm sure I was. And I am still. And so when we were talking about back in the day stories, he said, yep, you're very competitive for sure. I think he was referring back to our fights on the court at the church gym. But that's exactly who I am. I have never done well with losing. I cannot stand losing. Losing at my body, school, education, church, anything. I cannot stand it. I am driven to win. Always have, and always will. That's how God made me. And so I really think that the best thing that you can do as a feeler, as an NF, as a 3, all these things that I'm talking about, if you can relate to half of this, or all of it, is to be you. Be true to yourself, to thyself be true. Now, while understanding the weaknesses of who you are and others. When you get anxious, to try to just Like the other night, I was anxious over this meeting and I called Rochelle and I said, can you just walk me through this? Or here's what actually wasn't even that. I said, let me walk you through what I'm going to do and you tell me what you think. And that's where the consensus is good, when you need someone else just to listen and to say, you know what, you're doing the right thing. Nothing wrong with that. And so I felt better and I walked into the meeting and all was well. All went well. With patience, I really think that listening to other people's stories is very important. Nothing slows me down more than actually hearing that someone is sick in the hospital, or that one of my team members is feeling depressed, or that someone in my church feels isolated. I mean, not just as a pastor is that important. That's not important just as a pastor. That's important because you want to be a human being, not a human doing. The 3, the 8, we are human machines. We want to just get things done. But we are in this world, not of this world, but we are in this world, in this flesh, and people get robbed. I have this friend who got robbed twice in the same month. So I wrote a note to her and her family just saying, I feel with you. I'm sorry for what happened. Whereas everything in me wants to say, well, okay, next. That's not being a pastor or being a Christian. That's just being a human being, being compassionate. And of course, Jesus commands us to be compassionate. I mean, that's the whole point. And so people's stories helps me to be patient. Now, what exasperates me is when people are being idiots. And that's going back to being a 3 or being you, being who I am. You have to challenge the system. If you are called to be that lightning rod, that competitive type, yes, know yourself. Yes, be patient. Yes, know when you're working or you're, whatever they call it, presenting or manifesting out of your worst self, out of your stress points, out of your trigger points. It's very, very easy to do. But be yourself. And then have the guts, which is what I am learning to do, to actually present and show up as myself, to make that phone call to this one person who has the keys to the car and say, hey, you know what? I need those keys. I mean, I love what Jesus said to his disciples. Being a perfect man, maybe as a 3 or an 8, when he needed that donkey, remember when he was going into Jerusalem, what did he tell his disciples? Hey, can you go and just see what you can do about a donkey? Here's some cash. No, he said, go and tell that guy that I need his donkey. And so the disciples probably were thinking, okay. And they went and the guy said, okay, he needs it, he needs it. That's total 3 or 8, just being in his essence. I need this because I want to go and die on a cross for you. And I need to get there somehow. And that donkey that you have that's just sitting there, that you don't need, I need that donkey so I can go enter Jerusalem. And even though people are going to praise me in 3-4 days, I'm going to be hanging on a cross for your forgiveness. So therefore, give me that donkey. Maybe that's what I should name my Easter series next year. Give me that donkey. A study on the Enneagram. I might write that down. But what I'm saying is be you. Be your true self. Yes, know your weaknesses, know your strengths, but show up as yourself. Now, maybe the third obstacle, I mentioned anxiety, patience. I would say the third obstacle, maybe it is related to anxiety, is this thing that I'm talking about, is fear. Everything in me, when I have to do something or say something, my body, this horrible body of mine that is a mess half the time, tells me, nope, you're going to say the wrong thing, be too upset, people are going to hate you, you're going to be fired, you're going to be hated, you're wrong. My mind, my triggers, all these things, they tell me all these things and why I shouldn't act on my truth. And that has come with age, unfortunately. I never used to care, and maybe I should care more, so maybe there's some good in this, but my point is, I remember I read this book called, what is it? Eat, Win, Pray? Is that right? I don't know. You know that one by Elizabeth somewhere. Anyway, what I learned from her is she said that when there's fear, you should see that as an invitation to action. As an invitation to actually put push through the fear, because on the other side of fear is where your victory is. And that's what I have learned to do more and more. Every time that I feel afraid to stand up, to speak up, that my face is going to be all whacked and my eyes going to twitch and I'm going to come across as too mad or all these things, I see that as an invitation to be careful, yes, but to step up and to be counted. For the sake of the cross, for the sake of the joy set before him, he says in Hebrews 4, for the J said before him, he endured the cross. It's not just for me. We're not doing this for ourselves. We're doing this for the kids, for the youth, for the church, for humanity, for your city, for those orphans, for those elderly people, for the immigrant, for the refugee. You're doing this for the sake of others. If you're doing it for you, you're a narcissist. If you're doing it for others, you are divinity. You're a being like Christ. And when those fears come, man, you got to call a friend. You got to step into your truth. You have to practice. You have to have key phrases. My wife will always say, Jay, just try this. Say it this way. Because she's learned a ton from her own leaders and mentors on how to say things when you're maybe stuck. And I've practiced those things and they have helped me tremendously. But I guess what I'm saying here through all this is if you are a futurist type, you need to step into life. Step into your own shoes. I'm literally looking at my shoes here in front of me, so maybe that's why I want to end with this. You know, right now my shoes are right there next to me. I'm wearing just my sandals here. When I get ready, I need to go step into my shoes and put on my tie, put on my hat, pick up my briefcase, put on my suit, and go and change the world. If I just simply watch my shoes and just stay in my underwear, I won't change a thing, a soul. Step into your shoes. Step into your truth. How can you step into your truth, into your shoes of who you are? Those are my brown shoes that I'm looking at right now. Stop stepping into other people's shoes, meaning trying to be somebody else. How can you step into your own shoes today? What action, what thought, what meditation do you need to step into to become true to yourself today, this Wednesday, and tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day? I hope that these thoughts have helped you, my dear friend. Please subscribe, comment, like, share this episode with somebody that is needing some encouragement. Thank you for listening. I will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to The David Trigg Show. Find the complete archive at davidtrig.com or subscribe for free through the podcast app on iTunes or Stitcher on Android.
Each week, we bring you a message of joy, success, and personal power in spite of fear, anxiety, and depression. Because as we like to say, though there's pain in the night, gozo comes in the morning.